The rain pounded against my apartment windows like tiny bullets, matching the frantic rhythm of my heart. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through my bank account on my cracked phone screen. $237.42. Not enough, never enough. In the corner of my cramped studio, Lily slept peacefully in her second-hand crib, her tiny chest rising and falling, oblivious to our precarious existence. I pressed my palms against my tired eyes, the exhaustion of working double shifts at the downtown bistro settling deep in my bones. 6 months of running. 6 months of looking over my shoulder. 6 months of praying that Matteo Visconti would never find us. The memory of our first meeting still burned in my mind like a hot iron. I was catering a private event at the Rialto, an exclusive restaurant nestled in the heart of the city, reserved that night for what I'd been told was a private business gathering. What they'd failed to mention was that the business was decidedly illegal, and the man at the center of it all would change my life forever. I'd been carrying a tray of champagne flutes when I first saw him. Matteo Visconti. Unlike the older, heavy-set men I'd expected to see running the city's underworld, he was young, perhaps early 30s, with sharp features that looked carved from marble. His tailored black suit probably cost more than my yearly rent, and his presence commanded the attention of every person in the room. Even from across the crowded space, I felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch. "More champagne, table 7, my manager had hissed, snapping me from my trance. "And for God's sake, Ellie, don't stare at the guests." I moved through the room, distributing drinks with practiced efficiency, all while feeling his dark eyes tracking my movements. When I reached his table, my hands betrayed me. The tray tilted, sending a cascade of golden liquid directly onto his immaculate suit jacket. I'm so sorry," I stammered, mortification washing over me in hot waves. "Please, let me—" His hand caught my wrist as I frantically tried to dab at the stain with my serving napkin. His touch was gentle but firm, a contradiction that matched the expression in his eyes, something between amusement and curiosity. "It's just fabric," he said, his voice a low, rich timbre that sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. "What's your name?" Ellie Hayes." He released my wrist but not my gaze. "Ellie Hayes," he repeated, as if testing how my name felt on his tongue. I'll remember that. I didn't understand the weight of that promise until later, much later. What followed was a whirlwind I could never have anticipated. After that night, Matteo appeared at the restaurant frequently, always requesting my section. He left excessive tips that helped ease the constant financial pressure crushing me. He asked questions about my life, my dreams, my struggles, and I answered, naively flattered by the attention of a man who seemed genuinely interested in the mundane details of my existence. I didn't know who he really was then. Or perhaps I did, on some level, but chose to ignore the signs. The way other staff members fell silent when he entered, the deference shown by the restaurant owner, the ever-present shadow of his driver, Shaw's bodyguard, waiting by the sleek black Bentley outside. His first gift arrived after I'd mentioned my ancient laptop was dying, a brand-new MacBook delivered to my apartment address I never remembered giving him. When I tried to return it, insisting it was too expensive, he simply said, "I have the means to make your life easier, Ellie. Why wouldn't I use them?" Each barrier I put up, he dismantled with patience and persistence. Each time I pulled away, he drew me back with kindness and understanding, or what I mistook for kindness and understanding. By the time I learned who Matteo Visconti truly was, the heir to the Visconti crime empire, a man whose business dealings left bodies in their wake, I was already falling for him, and by the time I realized how dangerous that fall would be, it was too late. I was ensnared in a gilded cage of my own making. Our affair lasted 3 intoxicating months, 3 months of expensive dinners in private rooms of exclusive restaurants, 3 months of being whisked away to his penthouse apartment with its panoramic views of the city skyline, 3 months of feeling like Cinderella, all while ignoring the clock that was inevitably ticking toward midnight. Reality came crashing down the night. I overheard a conversation I was never meant to hear. I'd arrived early at his penthouse. He'd given me a key, another invisible chain binding me to him. Voices drifted from his home office, the door slightly ajar. "The Moretti problem needs to be handled," a man's voice said. "They're moving product through our territory." "I don't want a war," Matteo replied, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "But I want a message sent. Take out the younger brother. Make it public." "Consider it done, boss." My blood turned to ice as I backed away from the door. This wasn't a business discussion about real estate or investments as he'd led me to believe. This was an order for murder, delivered with the same casual tone someone might use to order dinner. That night, I smiled through dinner, laughed at his jokes, and let him make love to me on sheets that probably cost more than my monthly salary. All while my mind raced with plans of escape. The next morning, I withdrew every cent from my meager savings account and disappeared. I left my apartment, my job, and the life I'd built in the city. I changed my phone number and email address. I paid cash for a bus ticket to a small town 3 states away. And I prayed that Matteo's interest in me had been fleeting enough that he wouldn't bother to look too hard. But there was one complication I hadn't anticipated. One that became evident 6 weeks later when the pregnancy test showed positive. Lily was born on a snowy January morning in a hospital where no one knew me. I gave them a false name and paid in cash. Her eyes were Matteo's, dark and intense even as a newborn. Looking into them every day was both my greatest joy and my constant reminder of the danger lurking in our past. For 6 months, we survived. I found a job waiting tables at a local diner. I rented a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat. I made exactly one friend, my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patel, who sometimes watched Lily when my shifts overlapped with daycare closure. We lived simply, invisibly, and I almost convinced myself we were safe. Until tonight. A sharp knock at my door jolted me from my thoughts. I froze, my eyes darting to the clock, 11:47 p.m. Too late for a casual visitor. Too precise for a drunk neighbor at the wrong door. I moved silently to Lily's crib, my heart hammering against my ribs. She slept peacefully, one tiny fist curled against her cheek. I gently stroked her dark hair, so like her father's, and swallowed the panic rising in my throat. The knock came again. 3 sharp raps, demanding, certain. "I know you're in there, Ellie." His voice, that same rich timbre that had once made my knees weak, now sent terror coursing through my veins. How had he found us? What would he do? Would he take Lily from me? Would he hurt us for running? My mind raced through options. The fire escape was rusted and unsafe. The hallway had no other exit. We were trapped. "Open the door," Matteo said, his voice deceptively calm, "or I'll have Marco open it for me." I knew it wasn't an idle threat. I'd seen the size of his bodyguard's hands. With trembling fingers, I slid the chain lock into place. A laughable defense, but all I had, and cracked the door open as far as the chain would allow. And there he stood, as devastatingly handsome as the day I'd first spilled champagne on him. His black wool coat was dusted with rain droplets that glittered under the hallway's fluorescent lights. His hair was longer than I remembered, curling slightly at the collar of his shirt. But his eyes, those eyes that had once looked at me with desire and something I'd foolishly mistaken for love, now burned with a cold fury that made me step back. 6 months, he said quietly. 6 months of searching. Did you really think I wouldn't find you? Before I could respond, a soft whimper came from behind me. Lily was awake, stirring in her crib as if sensing the tension permeating our small sanctuary. Matteo's eyes shifted past me, widening slightly as understanding dawned on his face. "Open the door, Ellie." His voice had changed, an undercurrent of something dangerous threading through it. "Now." My hand shook as I unlatched the chain, knowing I was opening the door to more than just the man in the hallway. I was opening the door to our past, to all the secrets I'd kept, to a future I couldn't predict. Matteo stepped inside, his presence immediately making my small apartment shrink around us. His eyes never left the crib in the corner. Without looking at me, he moved toward it with slow, deliberate steps. I followed, my body tense with the primal instinct to protect my child. "Matteo, please." He stopped at the edge of the crib, looking down at Lily, who stared back at him with his own eyes. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he reached down, his large hand gentle as he stroked one finger along her cheek. "How old?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 6 months, I admitted, the truth hanging heavy between us. He turned to me then, his expression a storm of emotions I couldn't fully decipher. Anger, certainly. Betrayal. But something else too. Something that looked almost like wonder. "You hid my child from me." It wasn't a question. I was scared, I whispered. His jaw tightened. "You should have been scared of running." He looked back at Lily, who had curled her tiny fingers around his index finger, unaware of the significance of this moment, of the dangerous man whose blood ran through her veins. "You should have known I would find you both." He lifted Lily from the crib with surprising gentleness, cradling her against his chest as if he'd done it 1,000 times. She didn't cry or fuss, merely regarded him with curious eyes that matched his own. "Pack your things," he said, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that left no room for argument. "Both of you belong to me, and I'm taking you home." The finality in his voice sent a chill through me. I knew then that our brief taste of freedom had come to an end. The life I'd built for us, fragile as it was, had just collapsed, and the man standing before me, holding our daughter with possessive tenderness, had no intention of ever letting us go again. "We're not going anywhere," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "This is our home." Even as the words left my mouth, I knew how pitiful they sounded. Our home was a 450-square-foot studio with water stains on the ceiling and a perpetually dripping faucet. The kind of place Mateo would typically enter wearing gloves. He looked around, his expression unreadable. "This is what you chose over me? Over the life I could provide?" "I chose safety," I whispered. "For her." His eyes snapped back to mine, darkening with anger. "Safety? You think I wouldn't protect my own child? My own—" He paused, adjusting Lily in his arms as she began to fuss. "My own family?" The word hung in the air between us like smoke. Family. A concept so loaded with meaning, with expectations, with danger. "You have 5 minutes," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "Pack whatever you need for tonight. Anything else can be replaced." "And if I refuse?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Ellie. You know I always get what I want." I did know. It was one of the first things I'd learned about Matteo Visconti. His world operated by different rules. Rules he created, enforced, and changed at will. Rules that had once made me feel protected, but now felt like shackles. Lily began to cry in earnest, tiny fists waving in the air. I reached for her instinctively, but Matteo turned slightly away, shifting her in his arms with surprising competence. "Shh," he murmured, his deep voice softening as he spoke to her. "It's all right, Piccola. Papa's here now." The sight of him holding our daughter, this man who ordered executions as casually as dinner, sent a confusing mix of emotions coursing through me. Fear, certainly. Anger at his intrusion into our carefully constructed life. But something else too, something I was ashamed to acknowledge. Relief. Relief that the running was over. Relief that I no longer had to carry the weight of our survival alone. "She needs to be fed," I said, holding out my arms. Matteo studied me for a moment before carefully transferring Lily to me. Our fingers brushed in the exchange, and I felt the same electric current that had always sparked between us. 6 months apart hadn't diminished it in the slightest. As I settled into the threadbare armchair to feed Lily, Matteo turned away, giving us a moment of privacy that surprised me. He moved to the window instead, peering out through the blinds at the rain-slicked street below. "Your building has no security," he said, his voice tight with disapproval. "No cameras. The lock on your door could be picked by a child. Anyone could walk in here." "No one has reason to," I replied. "We're nobody here." He turned, his expression fierce. "You are never nobody, not to me." I looked down at Lily, focusing on her perfect face to avoid meeting his gaze. "How did you find us? Does it matter?" "It matters to me." He was silent for a long moment. "Your friend Mrs. Patel has a grandson who works for an insurance company that happens to be owned by a business associate of mine." When she mentioned the young single mother with a beautiful baby who moved in upstairs, he shrugged. "The world is smaller than you think, Ellie. My stomach twisted. Mrs. Patel, the sweet elderly woman who brought me homemade chai and called Lily Little Dumpling. I'd thought we were safe with her, that she was just a lonely widow who enjoyed the company. I'd never imagined she would be the thread that unraveled our new life. She had no idea who I was looking for, or why, Mateo added, reading the betrayal on my face. Don't blame her. Lily had drifted back to sleep at my breast. I adjusted my clothing and stood, moving to place her back in her crib. Mateo watched every movement like a hawk. She has your eyes, I said softly, unable to deny him this truth. And your nose, he replied, moving closer to look down at our sleeping daughter. Your stubborn chin, too, despite everything. A small smile tugged at my lips. You always said my stubbornness was what attracted you to me. It was, he acknowledged, until you used it to disappear with my child. The moment of warmth evaporated. I turned away from the crib and began gathering essentials. Diapers, wipes, Lily's favorite blanket, the stuffed elephant she couldn't sleep without. I moved mechanically, my mind racing. There had to be a way out of this, a way to convince him to let us go. Where are you taking us? I asked, zipping Lily's diaper bag. Home. Your penthouse isn't a home for a baby. His jaw tightened. I've made arrangements. The thought of what arrangements might entail coming from a man like Mateo sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I thought of the conversation I'd overheard, the casual order for a man's death. What kind of father would he be to our daughter? What kind of life would she have surrounded by violence and crime? I can't go with you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Mateo moved toward me, closing the distance between us until I could smell his cologne, the same expensive scent that used to cling to my skin after nights in his bed. He reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with a gentleness that belied the hardness in his eyes. You ran from me once, Ellie. I won't allow it to happen again. His fingers trailed down my cheek in a touch that was both a caress and a warning, especially not with my daughter. I forced myself to meet his gaze. She has a name. It's Lily. Something flickered across his face. Lily, he repeated, testing the name. It's pretty, but her full name will be Liliana Visconti. The casual way he claimed her, renamed her, integrated her into his world without consultation, sent a surge of defiance through me. Her last name is Hayes, like mine. His smile was cold, for now. A sharp knock at the door interrupted whatever response I might have made. Mateo didn't look surprised. That would be Marco, he said. Time to go. Reality crashed over me. This was happening. He was taking us. The life I'd built, meager as it was ending tonight. Wait, I pleaded. At least let me leave a note for my boss. And Mrs. Patel will worry if we just disappear. Already taken care of. As far as anyone in this town is concerned, you received a job offer in another state and left to pursue it. His expression softened fractionally at my shocked look. I'm not a monster, Ellie. I don't want to destroy your reputation here. You might need these connections again someday. The implication that I might one day return to this life hung unspoken between us. A permission he might grant if I behaved, if I submitted to his will, a leash he could yank if I strayed too far. The door opened without a knock, and Marco stepped inside. He was as I remembered, tall, broad, with a face that seemed permanently set in a scowl. His eyes swept the apartment, assessing threats out of habit, before landing on me. Ms. Hayes. He nodded, his voice gruff but not unkind. Good to see you again. Wish I could say the same, I muttered. Mateo's lips quirked into something almost like a smile before he schooled his features. Take the bags, Marco, and have someone come tomorrow for anything else of value. Already arranged, boss. Car's waiting downstairs. Mateo moved to the crib and lifted Lily with careful hands. She stirred but didn't wake, settling against his chest with a trust that made my heart ache. I reached for the baby carrier hanging by the door. She'll be fine, Mateo said, correctly interpreting my concern. I've got her. You don't know how to properly support her head, I've been practicing, he cut me off. With a doll, for weeks now, since I confirmed she existed. His eyes met mine, burning with an intensity that made me step back. Did you really think I wouldn't prepare to be a father once I knew? The image of Matteo Visconti, feared crime boss, ruthless businessman, practicing how to hold a baby with a doll, was so incongruous that I almost laughed. Instead, I bit my lip and followed him toward the door. The hallway was empty, the building silent save for the distant sound of a television from one of the other apartments. Marco led the way, Matteo followed with Lily, and I came last, feeling more like a prisoner than a mother. The night air was cool against my skin as we stepped outside. Rain had given way to mist, wreathing the streetlights in halos of gold. A sleek black Bentley idled at the curb, its engine a quiet purr in the stillness. Another man in a dark suit opened the rear door as we approached. Matteo carefully maneuvered inside with Lily, then turned, extending his hand to help me in. I ignored it, climbing in under my own power, a small, meaningless act of defiance. The car's interior was exactly as I remembered. Buttery, soft leather seats, the scent of luxury, the hushed quiet that seemed to insulate us from the outside world. Marco and the other man took their places in the front, and then we were moving, gliding away from the life I'd created toward an uncertain future under Matteo's control. I watched my apartment building disappear from view, a hollowness expanding in my chest. Where exactly are we going? My estate outside the city, Matteo replied, his attention on Lily, who remained peacefully asleep in his arms. It's more suitable for a child than the penthouse. More secure, too. I'd heard him mention this estate before, but had never seen it. It was his private retreat, a place even his business associates rarely visited. The thought of being taken there, isolated from the world, sent a fresh wave of anxiety through me. For how long? His eyes met mine in the dim light of the car's interior. For as long as it takes, as long as what takes, for you to accept that your place is with me, for you to understand that we are a family now. His voice softened as he looked down at our daughter. For you to trust me again. I turned away, staring out at the unfamiliar landscape rushing past. Fields had replaced buildings, dark shapes against a darker sky. We were already leaving the small town behind, heading somewhere rural, somewhere isolated, somewhere I couldn't easily escape from. I never trusted you, I lied. Yes, you did, he countered quietly. Before you overheard a conversation you didn't fully understand, before you ran instead of giving me a chance to explain. I whirled back to face him. Explain what? That you ordered someone killed, that you're not the successful businessman you pretended to be, but a criminal who hurts people? His expression remained impassive. My business has many facets, Ellie. Some less pleasant than others, but everything I do for a reason. And that makes it okay? It makes it necessary. He shifted Lily to his other arm, his movements careful despite the tension between us. The world isn't the simple place you want it to be. There aren't always clean choices. Murder is a pretty clear line, I hissed, keeping my voice low to avoid waking Lily. Is it? He raised an eyebrow. Would you kill to protect her? He nodded toward our daughter. Because I would. Without hesitation. I would burn cities to the ground to keep her safe. To keep you safe. The worst part was, I believed him. And something deep inside me, something primal and fierce, understood exactly what he meant. Because I would do the same for Lily. I already had, in a way, sacrificing my old life, my career aspirations, my few friendships to give her safety. Was I really so different from him? Or was it just a matter of means and opportunity? The thought disturbed me deeply. We fell into silence as the car continued through the night. Lily slept peacefully, oblivious to the tension surrounding her. Matteo kept his eyes on her face, studying her features as if memorizing them. I watched them both, this man and the child who bound us together irrevocably. After what seemed like hours, the car turned onto a private road, winding through dense trees that blocked out even the faint moonlight. Security gates appeared out of the darkness, opening silently to admit us. Beyond them, lights glimmered, revealing glimpses of a sprawling mansion set back from the road. Welcome home, Matteo said softly, as the car rolled to a stop in front of an imposing entrance. Home. The word echoed hollowly in my chest. This wasn't home. This was a beautiful prison, a gilded cage where Matteo would keep us, his possessions, his treasures, safe from a world he saw as a constant threat. As Marco opened the door and the cool night air rushed in, I made a silent vow to myself and to Lily. Whatever game Matteo was playing, whatever future he had planned for us, I wouldn't surrender easily. I might be trapped for now, but I would find a way to protect my daughter from the darkness of her father's world, even if it meant protecting her from him. Matteo stepped out of the car, Lily still cradled against his chest, and turned to offer his hand to me once more. This time I took it, feeling his warm fingers close around mine with possessive certainty. "Both of you belong to me now," he said, his voice low and intense, "and I protect what's mine." The entrance hall of Matteo's estate swallowed us in warm light and cold opulence. Marble floors gleamed beneath a crystal chandelier that cast fractured rainbows across cream-colored walls. The space was cavernous, designed to impress and intimidate visitors. A curved staircase swept upward, its polished banister reflecting the light like liquid gold. "The east wing has been prepared for you and Lily," Matteo said, leading the way across the hall. His voice echoed slightly in the vastness. "It has the best views of the sunrise." I followed silently, hyper-aware of Lily still nestled against his chest. She would wake soon, hungry and disoriented in these unfamiliar surroundings. Would she cry for me? Would she sense the tension vibrating between her parents? Parents. The word caught in my mind. Until tonight, I'd been Lily's only parent, her protector, her everything. Now she had a father who looked at her with possessive tenderness, the same look he gave his most valuable possessions. Marco disappeared with our bags, while another man I didn't recognize melted back into the shadows near the entrance. I wondered how many of Matteo's people were stationed throughout the house, invisible until needed. The thought made my skin crawl. "How many staff are here?" I asked, struggling to keep up with Matteo's long strides as we moved down a wide corridor lined with artwork that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. "Enough," he replied cryptically. "The grounds require maintenance. The house needs staff, and security is a priority." "You mean guards? We're being watched." He stopped at an ornate double door, turning to face me. "Not watched, Ellie. Protected. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing." His eyes softened slightly as they moved over my face. "You're exhausted. We can discuss security protocols tomorrow." Before I could argue, he pushed open the doors to reveal a suite that took my breath away, despite my determination to remain unimpressed. The sitting room was painted a soft sage green, with comfortable-looking furniture arranged around a marble fireplace where flames already danced. Fresh flowers sat in crystal vases on side tables, their scent delicate and soothing. Beyond, I glimpsed a bedroom with a massive four-poster bed draped in cream-colored linens. But it was the third room that made me freeze in the doorway. A nursery, perfect in every detail. I moved toward it as if in a trance, taking in the pale yellow walls, the white crib with its canopy of sheer fabric, the changing table stocked with supplies, the rocking chair by the window overlooking what would be gardens in the daylight. A mobile of delicate stars and moons hung over the crib, turning gently in the air current from the doorway. "When did you do this?" I whispered, running my fingers over the soft blankets folded at the foot of the crib. "I started it 3 months ago," Matteo said, coming to stand beside me. "When my investigator confirmed you'd given birth." The air rushed from my lungs. "You've known about Lily for 3 months? You've been watching us all this time?" "Not watching. Waiting." He shifted Lily in his arms as she began to stir, her little face scrunching with the prelude to waking. Preparing. Preparing for what? His eyes met mine, dark and intense. "To be a father. To bring you both home where you belong." Before I could respond, Lily's eyes fluttered open. She looked up at Matteo, confusion clouding her expression for a moment, before her face crumpled, and she began to cry. I reached for her instinctively, and this time Matteo surrendered her to my arms. "She's hungry," I said, moving to the rocking chair, "and overwhelmed. This is all too much." Matteo watched as I settled into the chair, a strange expression crossing his face, something almost like vulnerability, gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "I'll give you privacy," he said, turning toward the door. "There's food in the small refrigerator behind the changing table, clothes in the dresser. Everything you should need for tonight." He paused at the threshold, looking back at us. "Rest, Ellie. We have much to discuss tomorrow." The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow felt more final than a slam. I looked down at Lily, now contentedly nursing, her eyes heavy-lidded with returning sleep. "What are we going to do?" I whispered, stroking her downy hair. "What am I going to do?" Only her gentle breathing answered me. After she fell back asleep, I placed her in the crib, trying to ignore how perfectly she fit there, as if it had been made to her exact measurements. Perhaps it had been. The thought was both touching and terrifying. I explored our new prison while she slept. The suite was larger than my entire apartment, with the sitting room, bedroom, nursery, and a luxurious bathroom with a soaking tub I could actually stretch out in. Everything was tasteful, expensive, and clearly chosen with care. My favorite shade of green on the walls. The exact firmness of pillow I preferred on the bed. Lily's favorite stuffed elephant already placed in her crib, though I hadn't unpacked it yet. Details I'd mentioned to Mateo during our time together. Casual preferences I'd expressed in passing conversation, all remembered and implemented in this space. It was thoughtful. It was thorough. It was absolutely terrifying. I tried the door to the hallway, unlocked. But where would I go? I had no idea where we were. No phone, no money, no transportation, and Mateo's security undoubtedly had instructions to keep me on the property. The windows were next. They opened, but a quick glance outside confirmed we were on the second floor, with at least a 20-foot drop to manicured gardens below. Not an option with a baby. Exhaustion crashed over me as the adrenaline of the night finally ebbed. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. I needed to think, to plan, but my mind felt wrapped in cotton, sluggish with fatigue and overwhelm. Just for tonight, I decided. I would rest tonight, gather my strength, and begin figuring out our next steps tomorrow. I showered in the opulent bathroom, the hot water and expensive products a luxury I hadn't experienced in months. Clean clothes waited for me, silk pajamas in exactly my size. I pulled them on, trying not to think about how Mateo knew my current measurements. I checked on Lily one more time, watching her chest rise and fall with peaceful breaths, before crawling into the massive bed. The sheets smelled of lavender and felt like heaven against my skin. Despite my determination to stay awake, to keep vigil, exhaustion pulled me under almost immediately. I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of Lily's morning babble. For a moment, confusion reigned, the luxurious surroundings so different from our tiny apartment. Then memory crashed back, and with it, dread. Mateo, the estate, our capture disguised as a homecoming. I hurried to the nursery, expecting to find Lily alone in her crib. Instead, I froze in the doorway. Mateo sat in the rocking chair, Lily on his lap. He was dressed impeccably in what appeared to be casual wear for him. Dark trousers and a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He was speaking to her in a low voice, in Italian, his expression softer than I'd ever seen it. Lily looked up at him, fascinated by this new person, her tiny hands reaching for his face. As I watched, she grabbed his nose, and to my shock, Mateo laughed, a warm, genuine sound I'd rarely heard from him. The scene was so domestic, so normal, that for a moment I could almost forget who he was, what he was. Then he looked up and saw me, and the mask slipped back into place. Not completely, but enough that I remembered the danger beneath the surface. "Good morning," he said, his voice gentle. "We were trying to let you sleep." I moved into the room, unable to hide my surprise. "How long have you been with her?" "About an hour." She was awake but not crying. I heard her on the monitor. He nodded toward a device on the side table that I hadn't noticed the night before. "You have a baby monitor in your room?" "I have monitors everywhere important." His eyes never left my face. "And nothing is more important than what happens in this room." The implication sent a chill down my spine, despite the warmth in his voice. Nothing happened in this house without Mateo's knowledge. Nothing. "She'll need to be changed and fed," I said, reaching for Lily. To my surprise, he stood and transferred her to my arms without protest. "I've already changed her," he said, and I noticed for the first time the fresh diaper. "But I can't help with feeding, obviously." I stared at him. You changed her diaper? A flash of irritation crossed his face. I'm not incompetent, Ellie. I told you I've been preparing. Preparing to change diapers wasn't exactly what I'd expect from... I trailed off, unsure how to finish. From a monster? He supplied, his voice hardening slightly. Is that how you see me? I busied myself with settling Lily for her morning feeding, using it as an excuse not to meet his eyes. I don't know who you are anymore, Mateo. Maybe I never did. He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost its edge. I've arranged for breakfast on the terrace once you're finished here. The weather is perfect this morning. It was a peace offering of sorts. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. 30 minutes? He asked. That should be fine. He moved to the door, then paused, looking back at us. She has your smile, you know. When she's happy, she lights up just like you do. Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me with a confused jumble of emotions I couldn't begin to untangle. 30 minutes later, dressed in clothes I found in the closet, all new, all my size, all in styles I would have chosen myself, I carried Lily out onto the terrace Mateo had mentioned. The morning air was crisp but pleasant, scented with roses from the gardens that stretched out below us. The estate was even more imposing in daylight, acres of manicured grounds surrounded by forest, with mountains visible in the distance. Isolated, remote, secure. Mateo stood at the stone balustrade, his back to me as he surveyed his domain. He turned at our approach, his eyes warming as they fell on Lily in my arms. Perfect timing, he said, gesturing to a table set for breakfast. A high chair, brand new and top of the line, waited beside it. I thought perhaps we could try her with some mashed banana this morning, unless you've already started her on solids. The normalcy of the question, the careful consideration behind it, threw me off balance again. Yes, actually. She's had banana before. She likes it. He nodded, looking pleased. Excellent. Please sit. I settled Lily into the high chair, while Mateo held my chair for me. An old-world courtesy that had charmed me when we first met. Now it felt like another aspect of control, of ownership. Everything in its proper place. Everyone in their assigned role. A woman I didn't recognize appeared with coffee and a spread of breakfast foods that would have fed 6 people. She smiled at Lily before disappearing back into the house without a word. Who was that? I asked, pouring myself coffee from a silver pot. Elena. She manages the household staff. Mateo prepared a small dish of mashed banana for Lily with practiced ease. You'll meet everyone properly later today. How many people work here? On the estate itself? About 20. Groundskeepers, household staff, security. He placed the dish on the tray of Lily's high chair. Some live on the property. Others commute from the village about 10 miles away. 20 people. 20 witnesses if I tried to leave. 20 pairs of eyes loyal to Mateo, and they all know who I am, what I am to you, I asked, watching as Lily smashed a tiny fist into the banana, more interested in its texture than eating it. Mateo's expression grew serious. They know you are the mother of my child, that you are under my protection, that your comfort and safety are their highest priority, and if I wanted to leave, his jaw tightened. We're not discussing that today. Then what are we discussing? He set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. Our future. Lily's future. The life we will build together. You've planned it all out, haven't you? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Without any input from me. I've created possibilities, he corrected. A foundation. The details are for us to decide together. As long as those details don't include me leaving. His eyes met mine, dark and intense. Why would you want to leave, Ellie? What can the world out there offer you that I can't provide here? Safety, security, luxury, education for Lily, a family. Freedom, I whispered. Freedom is an illusion, he said, his voice softening. We're all constrained by something. Money, circumstance, fear. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. At least my constraints come with benefits. I pulled my hand away. Golden handcuffs are still handcuffs, Mateo. Something flashed in his eyes. Anger? Hurt? It was gone before I could identify it. You haven't asked how I found you, he said, changing the subject. You already told me. Mrs. Patel's grandson. That's how I confirmed where you were. Not how I knew to look for you in the first place. He took a sip of his coffee, watching me over the rim. Did you really think changing your name and moving across state lines would be enough? That I wouldn't have resources dedicated to finding you? My stomach nodded. How then? The hospital where you gave birth. One of the nurses recognized your face from the photographs my people distributed. His lips curved into a cold smile. They thought you were a missing person, a loved one desperately searching for you. I felt sick. All those months of careful planning, of covering my tracks, of paying cash and using false names, undone by a well-meaning nurse who thought she was helping. You had people looking for me all that time? The idea that I'd never truly escaped, that I'd only been temporarily misplaced, sent a wave of hopelessness through me. From the moment I realized you were gone, he confirmed. But it was the pregnancy that truly motivated me. When my investigator reported you'd been seen at a prenatal clinic, his expression darkened. You can imagine what went through my mind. I could. Matteo Visconti, discovering the woman who had fled from him was carrying his child. I was surprised he hadn't burned the country to the ground looking for us. Why wait 3 months after you knew about Lily? I asked. Why not come for us immediately? His eyes moved to our daughter, now happily smearing banana across her face. I needed to prepare, not just the nursery, but myself. I needed to understand what kind of father I wanted to be. His voice dropped, becoming almost inaudible. What kind of father she deserves. For the first time, I glimpsed the conflict within him. The man raised in a world of violence and power, struggling with the responsibility of raising an innocent child. It humanized him in a way that made it harder to see him as the monster I needed him to be. And what kind of father is that? I asked softly. His eyes met mine, and I saw raw honesty there. A better one than I had. Before I could respond, Lily knocked her dish to the floor with a gleeful squeal. The tension broke as we both reached for it, our hands colliding beneath the table. Matteo's fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, and for a moment, we were back in the restaurant where we'd first met. Just a man and a woman, connected by an accidental touch. Then, reality reasserted itself. I pulled away, focusing on cleaning Lily's messy hands and face while Matteo retrieved the fallen dish. I have business calls this morning, he said, standing. Elena will show you the grounds if you'd like to explore. The entire estate is secure. You can go anywhere within the perimeter fence. The boundaries of my new cage, clearly defined. And this afternoon? I asked, unable to keep a hint of defiance from my voice. His expression softened as he looked at Lily, then back to me. This afternoon, I thought perhaps we could spend time together. As a family. He paused, then added quietly, I've missed a lot of firsts already, Ellie. I don't want to miss any more. With that, he was gone, leaving me with a squirming baby and a heart full of conflicted emotions I couldn't begin to sort through. Because beneath the fear and resentment, beneath the anger at being controlled and confined, a tiny, treacherous part of me remembered why I'd fallen for Matteo Visconti in the first place. And that part whispered that maybe, just maybe, there was a future here that wouldn't feel like imprisonment. Elena arrived shortly after Matteo departed, a slim woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. She moved with quiet efficiency, clearing the breakfast dishes while I wiped the last traces of banana from Lily's face and hands. Would you like to see the gardens, Ms. Hayes? She asked, her voice carrying just a hint of an Italian accent. The roses are particularly beautiful this time of year. I hesitated, torn between wanting to explore our new surroundings and fearing that accepting any part of this luxurious prison would somehow signal surrender. But Lily was getting restless, straining against the confines of the high chair, and I knew she needed fresh air and stimulation. Yes, I decided, that would be nice. Is there a stroller I could use for Lily? Elena nodded. Mr. Visconti has provided everything. If you'll follow me? She led us through the house, pointing out rooms as we passed. The main living area with its soaring ceilings and comfortable furniture, a formal dining room that could seat 20, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Each space was immaculate, expensively furnished, and utterly impersonal. This wasn't a home. It was a showpiece, designed to impress rather than comfort. Until we reached a small sitting room tucked away in a corner of the first floor. Here, the atmosphere changed. Books were scattered on side tables. A throw blanket was carelessly tossed over one arm of a well-worn leather couch. A glass with fingerprints still visible sat on a coaster. Mr. Visconti's private study, Elena explained, noticing my surprise. He spends most of his evenings here. I tried to reconcile this lived-in space with the cold perfection of the rest of the house, and with the man I thought I knew. Before I could ponder it further, Elena led us to a mudroom where a top-of-the-line stroller waited, still with its tags attached. Outside, the October air carried the first hints of autumn, a crispness that invigorated rather than chilled. Lily babbled happily as I strapped her into the stroller, her eyes wide with interest at the new surroundings. The gardens were stunning, meticulously maintained flower beds, sculptured hedges, and gravel paths winding between fountains and statues. In the distance, I could see an orchard, its trees heavy with late-season fruit. The estate encompasses about 200 acres, Elena said as we walked. Most of it is woodland, but the gardens cover nearly 15 acres, and there's a small lake beyond the orchard. 200 acres, isolated and self-contained. A beautiful wilderness with invisible boundaries. I wondered how many of Matteo's security staff patrolled those boundaries, how many cameras monitored every movement within them. "How long have you worked for Mr. Visconti?" I asked, steering the stroller along a path lined with lavender. "Nearly 20 years, Elena replied, "since he was a young man, just beginning to take over his father's business interests." I glanced at her, curious despite myself. "You knew his father?" A shadow crossed her face. "Yes. Mr. Visconti Sr. was a different sort of employer." "Different how?" She hesitated, then said carefully, "Less controlled, more volatile." Her eyes met mine briefly. "The son is not the father, Ms. Hayes. Remember that." Before I could press further, Lily began fussing, ready for her mid-morning nap. Elena guided us back to the house and up to our suite, where I put Lily down in her perfect nursery with its soft yellow walls and gentle mobile. "Would you like lunch on the terrace again or in your sitting room?" Elena asked as I closed the nursery door. "Actually, I'm not very hungry," I said, suddenly overwhelmed by the unreality of the situation, discussing lunch arrangements like a pampered guest rather than a captive. "I think I'll just rest while Lily naps." Elena nodded, her expression unreadable. "Of course. Press the intercom button by your door if you need anything." She paused, then added, "Mr. Visconti asked that you be ready by 2 o'clock. He has something planned for this afternoon." After she left, I sank onto the edge of the bed, my mind racing. Something planned. Another piece of the life he was constructing around us. Another link in the gilded chain. I should have been plotting escape, searching for weaknesses in security, making plans to get Lily away from Matteo's influence. Instead, I found myself opening the closet, examining the clothes he'd provided. Everything in my size, in styles I would have chosen. How had he known? Had he been watching me all these months, noting my preferences? Or did he simply remember the details I'd shared during our time together? Neither option was comforting. At precisely 2 o'clock, a knock came at the door. I'd changed into a simple sundress and sandals, arranged my hair in a neat ponytail, and applied minimal makeup. Lily wore one of the new outfits from the dresser, a pale blue romper that made her eyes look even more like her father's. Matteo stood in the hallway, changed from his morning attire into casual clothes that probably cost more than a month's rent at my old apartment. His eyes swept over us, a smile tugging at his lips. "You look beautiful," he said, his gaze lingering on my face. "Both of you." I shifted Lily in my arms. "Elena said you had something planned?" "A small excursion," he confirmed, reaching for Lily. To my surprise, she went to him willingly, her tiny hands immediately going to the buttons on his shirt. I thought perhaps the lake? It's peaceful there. I followed him downstairs and out a different door than we'd used that morning, leading to a paved path that wound through a grove of oak trees. Matteo carried Lily with practiced ease, pointing out birds and squirrels to her in a gentle voice I'd never heard him use with anyone else. We walked in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds Lily's occasional babble and the crunch of our feet on the path. It felt almost normal, a family outing on a beautiful autumn day. If I squinted, I could almost pretend we were just a regular couple, that Mateo was just a devoted father, that our story was simple and uncomplicated. The illusion shattered when we reached the lake. A picnic had been set up on its shore, a blanket spread beneath a large oak tree, a wicker basket waiting. 2 security men stood at a discreet distance, their presence a reminder of exactly who we were walking with. "Your men follow you everywhere?" I asked as we settled on the blanket, Lily between us. "Not everywhere," Mateo replied, opening the basket to reveal an assortment of gourmet sandwiches, fruits, and a bottle of wine. "But outdoors, yes, it's necessary. Because of your business interests?" He paused, his eyes meeting mine. "Yes, I have enemies, Ellie. People who would use any vulnerability against me." His gaze dropped to Lily, who was happily pulling at the grass. "And now I have the greatest vulnerability of all." I felt a chill despite the warm sunshine. "That's why you brought us here. Not because you missed us, not because you want to be a father, but because we're a weakness that needs to be controlled." Anger flashed across his face, quickly contained. "Is that what you think? That I see my own child as a liability to be managed? Isn't that exactly what you just said?" He took a deep breath, visibly reining in his temper. "What I said is that there are people who would harm her to get to me, people who would harm you. Keeping you here, protected, is not about controlling you, Ellie. It's about keeping you safe. Safe from the enemies you've made through your criminal activities," I countered, keeping my voice low but intense. "Safe from the consequences of your choices." Mateo's jaw tightened. "My choices have given us this." He gestured to the estate around us. "Security, comfort, a future where Lily will want for nothing, except a father she can be proud of." The words hung between us, sharp and wounding. For a moment, raw hurt flashed across Mateo's face before his expression hardened. "And what would make you proud, Ellie?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "A father who struggles to make ends meet, who can't protect his family from the harshness of the world, who watches his child go without, a father who doesn't order murders over dinner," I shot back. "You heard a fragment of a conversation you didn't understand," he said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Did you ever consider asking me about it? Giving me a chance to explain before you disappeared with my child? What explanation could possibly justify what I heard?" He was silent for a long moment, watching Lily as she crawled toward the edge of the blanket, pursuing a colorful leaf that had caught her attention. When he spoke again, his voice was measured, controlled. The Moretti family had been trafficking young women through our territory. Girls as young as 14, brought in from Eastern Europe with promises of modeling careers, legitimate work. Instead, they were forced into prostitution, kept compliant with drugs and violence. His eyes met mine, dark with anger that wasn't directed at me. We discovered 3 of them dead in an abandoned warehouse, overdosed on heroin the Morettis gave them to keep them docile. I swallowed, the picnic lunch suddenly tasteless in my mouth. "I tried to handle it through proper channels," Mateo continued. "Pressure on their business interests. Negotiations with their leader. But Dario Moretti, the younger brother you heard me mention, he was the one running the operation, and he wasn't stopping. So you had him killed." "I had him removed as a threat," Mateo corrected, "and the trafficking operation dismantled. The remaining girls were provided medical care, legal assistance, and funds to return home if they wished. I wanted to disbelieve him, to dismiss his explanation as a convenient justification, but I'd seen his face as he spoke of the dead girls, the genuine anger there. It matched what I'd glimpsed in him during our time together, a rigid code of honor beneath the criminal exterior, lines he wouldn't cross even as he crossed others. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" I asked quietly. "Would you have believed me? Without knowing the context, without understanding the world I operate in?" He sighed, reaching out to redirect Lily as she crawled too close to the lake's edge. "My business isn't always clean, Ellie. I don't pretend it is. but neither am I the monster you've decided I am. Lily chose that moment to lose interest in exploration and crawl back to us, pulling herself up on Mateo's leg to stand unsteadily. He steadied her automatically, his large hands gentle around her tiny waist. "Duh," she said clearly, patting his cheek with a chubby hand. The shock on Mateo's face was almost comical. His eyes widened, lips parting in surprise as he looked from Lily to me. "Did she just—" he whispered. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. She's been babbling syllables for a while, but that's the first time she said anything that sounded like Dad. The naked emotion on Mateo's face as he looked at our daughter, wonder, pride, a fierce protectiveness, cracked something in my carefully constructed armor. This wasn't the calculated response of a man playing the role of father. This was raw, genuine, unguarded feeling. "Hello, Piccola," he murmured, lifting her into his lap. "Yes, I'm your papa. I'm right here." Lily grinned up at him, reaching for his face again in a gesture that was quickly becoming a habit. He caught her tiny hand and pressed a kiss to her palm, his eyes never leaving her face. I looked away, suddenly feeling like an intruder on something private and precious. The dynamic between us had shifted, complicated by this new bond forming between father and daughter. It was harder to see Mateo as the enemy when he looked at Lily with such naked adoration. We finished our picnic as the afternoon waned, the conversation turning to safer topics: Lily's development, her likes and dislikes, the little milestones I'd witnessed in her short life. I found myself sharing stories I'd never thought I'd tell him, watching his face light up with each new detail about our daughter's existence. As we packed up to return to the house, Mateo grew serious again. "I want you to be happy here, Ellie," he said, his eyes searching mine. "Both of you. This doesn't have to be a prison if you don't make it one." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not going to keep you locked in your room. You have freedom within the estate, access to anything you need or want. You can make a life here. A life where I never leave, never see friends or family, never have independence." He hesitated, adjusting Lily in his arms as she began to doze against his shoulder. "For now, yes. The security concerns are real, Ellie. But in time, once you understand the situation better, once you—" he trailed off. "Once I what? Submit? Accept my gilded cage? Once you trust me again," he finished quietly. "Once we rebuild what we had." I laughed, the sound brittle even to my own ears. "We didn't have anything real, Mateo. You lied to me from the beginning, about who you were, what you did." "I never lied about how I felt about you," he countered, his voice intense. "Everything between us was real. The only fiction was the scope of my business interests. That's a pretty significant fiction. Would you have given me a chance if you'd known from the start? If I'd introduced myself as Matteo Visconti, head of the Visconti crime family? I had no answer for that, because the truth was, I wouldn't have. I would have run as far and fast as I could. And I would never have known what it was like to be loved by him, to feel safe and cherished and protected, at least for a time." We walked back to the house in silence, Lily sleeping peacefully against Mateo's shoulder. The security men followed at a distance, their presence a constant reminder of the reality we lived in. Dinner that evening was served in a smaller dining room, more intimate than the formal space I'd glimpsed earlier. Lily sat in her high chair between us, happily making a mess of the pureed vegetables Elena had prepared for her. Mateo and I maintained a careful civility, discussing neutral topics like the estate's history and the changing seasons. It was only as we finished dessert, a delicate lemon tart that reminded me of our first real date, that Mateo broached the subject we'd been avoiding since our conversation at the lake. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, setting down his coffee cup, "about Lily deserving a father she can be proud of." I tensed, unsure where he was going with this. "You're right," he continued, surprising me. "She does deserve that, and I want to be that for her." His eyes met mine across the table. "Which is why I've been making changes to my business interests over the past few months." "What kind of changes?" "Legitimate investments, legal enterprises, moving capital from less reputable ventures into above-board businesses." He paused. "It's a slow process. The world I operate in doesn't allow for clean breaks. But I've begun." I studied his face, looking for deception and finding only earnest determination. Why would you do that? Because of her. He nodded toward Lily, who was happily smashing a piece of tart between her fingers. Because of you. Because I want a different future than the one my father envisioned for me. I don't understand. Matteo was quiet for a moment, his expression distant. My father ruled through fear. His business, his family, his entire world, all controlled through violence and intimidation. I grew up watching him destroy people who crossed him, including... He hesitated. Including my mother. When she tried to leave with me, I felt a chill at his words. What happened? He found us, brought us back. His eyes met mine, and I saw the shadow of an old pain there. She was never the same afterward, broken in ways I was too young to understand. His voice softened. I don't want that for Lily. I don't want her to fear me, to see me as my father was. And I don't want that for you either. The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. For the first time, I glimpsed the wounded boy beneath the powerful man, the child who had witnessed his mother's suffering at his father's hands and carried those scars into adulthood. I'm not your mother, Matteo, I said gently. And you're not your father, aren't I? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I found you. I brought you back. I'm keeping you here against your will, telling myself it's for your own protection. The parallel hung between us, uncomfortable in its accuracy. There's a difference, I said after a moment. You haven't hurt me. You've provided for Lily. You're trying to change. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face at what might have been the first words of understanding I'd offered since our reunion. I am trying, he said simply, for both of you. But these changes take time, and until they're complete, until the transition is finished and the threats neutralized, this is the safest place for you and Lily. I wanted to argue, to insist on my freedom regardless of the risk. But as I looked at Lily, happily oblivious to the complexities surrounding her existence, I found myself hesitating. What right did I have to expose her to danger for the sake of my independence? How long? I asked finally. A year. Maybe 18 months for the most significant transitions. His eyes held mine. Give me that time, Ellie. Give us that time. To be a family. To build something real. To create a future Lily can be proud of. It wasn't a small request. A year or more of living under Matteo's protection. In his world. Subject to his rules. A year of watching him with our daughter. Of navigating the complicated feelings his presence stirred in me. But as I looked at him across the table, I saw not the crime boss who had terrified me with his power, but the man who had stolen my heart once, who had remembered my favorite color and the firmness of pillow I preferred, who had prepared for months to welcome our child, who looked at Lily with genuine love and a desperate desire to be better than his own father had been. I need time to think, I said finally, rising from the table. This isn't a decision I can make tonight. Matteo nodded, accepting my response without pushing for more. Take all the time you need, he said, his voice gentle. We're not going anywhere. Weeks passed, and autumn deepened around the estate. The gardens blazed with fiery colors before fading to brown, and morning frost painted the grass silver. I watched the changing seasons from the windows of our suite, from the terrace, from the paths that wound through the grounds, always within the invisible boundaries Matteo had established, always under the discreet but constant watch of his security team. I hadn't given Matteo an answer to his proposal. He hadn't pushed for one. Instead, we fell into an uneasy routine, a strange facsimile of family life. Breakfast together in the mornings before he disappeared into his study for business calls. Afternoons with Lily, sometimes just the three of us. Sometimes with Matteo absent for meetings he never fully explained. Dinner in the evening, with conversation that carefully avoided the most contentious subjects. And every day, I watched him with Lily, watched how he learned her routines, her preferences, her tiny personality quirks, how he adapted his entire schedule around her nap times, how his face softened whenever she reached for him, which she did with increasing frequency. Da, she would call, arms outstretched, and no matter what he was doing, reviewing documents, speaking on the phone, conferring with one of his men, he would stop and go to her. I tried to maintain my distance, to remember what he was, and what he had done, but it became increasingly difficult as I witnessed the changes in him. The feared crime boss who had terrified me that first night was rarely in evidence now. Instead, I saw a man struggling to reconcile the life he had inherited with the future he wanted to create. One evening, about a month after our arrival, I found him in the nursery after putting Lily down for the night. He stood by her crib, watching her sleep, his expression unguarded in a way it seldom was around me. "She's growing so fast," he said softly as I entered. "I've missed so much already." I moved to stand beside him, looking down at our sleeping daughter. "She knows you now," I offered. "She looks for you when she hears your voice." He nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "I never expected this," he admitted. "To feel this way about someone so small, so defenseless. It changes you," I said, "having a child." "Yes." He turned to me, his eyes searching mine in the dim light. "It does. It makes you want to be better, to create a safer world for them." "Is that what you're doing? Creating a safer world?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign of internal conflict. "I'm trying. The transition is complicated. Some of my business associates are resistant to the changes I'm implementing. They see legitimate enterprises as less profitable, more constrained." "And are they?" I asked, curious despite myself. "In the short term, perhaps, but they're sustainable. They don't require constant vigilance against law enforcement. They don't result in blood feuds that last generations." His voice held a weariness I hadn't heard before. "They don't make it impossible to sleep at night." The admission surprised me, the first acknowledgement that his chosen path had costs beyond the practical. I studied his face, noting the faint shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "You're not sleeping well," I observed. A rueful smile tugged at his lips. "Occupational hazard, because of the business transition? Partly." His eyes met mine, holding them. "And partly because you're so close, yet still so far away." The rawness of his admission caught me off guard. For weeks, he had maintained a careful distance, never pushing, never presuming. Now, in the quiet of the nursery with our daughter sleeping peacefully beside us, the mask had slipped. "Matteo." "I know," he interrupted gently. "You need time. I understand that. I've taken your choices away, confined you here, asked you to accept a life you never wanted. I don't expect forgiveness, Ellie. But I want you to know that my feelings for you have never changed." Before I could respond, he leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to Lily's forehead, then straightened and moved past me to the door. "Good night," he said quietly, and was gone, leaving me with a tumult of emotions I couldn't begin to sort through. That night marked a shift in our dynamic. Matteo began including me in discussions about the business transitions he was implementing, explaining the complexities of extracting himself from certain enterprises while maintaining the protection his position afforded. I found myself offering suggestions, drawing on my business courses from college, a part of my life I'd nearly forgotten in the chaos of the past year. "You're good at this," he observed one evening as we sat in his study, reviewing plans for a new legitimate investment in a tech startup. "You see angles I miss. I was 3 credits shy of a business degree when I met you," I admitted. "Before I got distracted by a mysterious man who left extravagant tips and asked too many questions." His smile was warm, reaching his eyes in a way that made my heart beat faster despite my best intentions. "I remember. You were taking night classes while working at the restaurant. You remember that?" I asked, surprised by the detail. "I remember everything about you, Ellie," he said simply. "Every conversation, every dream you shared, every plan for the future." I looked down at the document spread before us, uncomfortable with the intensity of his gaze and the emotions it stirred. Those dreams seem very far away now. "They don't have to be." He hesitated, then reached across the desk to cover my hand with his. "Tell me what you want, Ellie. What would make you happy here?" The question caught me off guard. For weeks, I'd been thinking of our situation as temporary, a holding pattern until I could figure out an escape, or until Matteo's promised transition was complete. The idea of building a life here, of finding happiness within these gilded constraints, hadn't occurred to me. I don't know, I said honestly. I haven't thought about what I want in a long time. It's always been about survival, about Lily. Think about it now, he urged. Anything within my power to give you is yours. Just name it. I considered his offer, turning it over in my mind. What did I want? Safety for Lily? Yes. But we had that now, in abundance. Financial security, also provided to an extent I could never have achieved on my own, but beyond those basic needs, purpose. I said finally, I need something that's mine, some way to contribute, to use my mind, to feel like more than just an accessory to your life. Matteo nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. The business degree you never finished, he mused. Would you want to complete it? We could arrange remote classes, tutors if needed. The suggestion sparked something in me. A flicker of the ambition I'd set aside when Lily was born, when survival became my only goal. Maybe. Or maybe something different. I don't know yet. Take time to consider it, he said, giving my hand a gentle squeeze before releasing it. Whatever you decide, I'll make it happen. That night, lying in bed, I allowed myself to truly contemplate the future for the first time since discovering Matteo's true identity. A future where we remained here, where Lily grew up with both parents, where Matteo continued his transition to legitimate business, a future where I might find my own path, separate from, but parallel to his. It wasn't the life I'd envisioned for myself. But as I drifted toward sleep, I had to acknowledge that it might not be as intolerable as I'd first believed. Winter arrived with a sudden snowstorm that blanketed the estate in white. Lily, now nearly 9 months old, pressed her tiny hands against the window glass in wonder, babbling excitedly at the swirling flakes. Her first snow, Matteo said, coming to stand beside us as we watched from the sitting room window. We should take her out in it, let her experience it properly. 20 minutes later, bundled in winter gear I hadn't known was stored in our closets, we ventured onto the terrace. Lily's eyes widened as Matteo carried her down the steps into the garden, where snow continued to fall in fat, lazy flakes. He knelt, still holding her securely, and scooped up a handful of snow, letting it fall through his fingers for her to watch. Her delighted laugh, a sound that never failed to warm my heart, echoed in the crisp air. I stood a few feet away, watching this moment between father and daughter, struck by how natural they looked together, how right. Matteo glanced up, catching me watching them, and smiled. A genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his face. In that moment, he wasn't a crime boss or a captor, or even the complicated man I'd been living with for months. He was simply a father sharing his daughter's joy, and something inside me softened in response. Come here, he called, holding out his free hand to me. She wants you to join us. I hesitated only briefly before moving toward them, taking Matteo's outstretched hand and kneeling beside them in the snow. Lily immediately reached for me, her mittened hand patting my cheek in her familiar gesture of affection. Ma! She exclaimed, a new addition to her limited vocabulary that never failed to make my heart swell. Yes, sweetheart, I said, kissing her cold reddened cheek. Mama's here. As I looked up, I found Matteo watching us, his eyes full of an emotion I wasn't ready to name. Without thinking, I reached out and brushed a snowflake from his eyelash, my fingers lingering against his skin. Thank you, I said softly, for this moment, for letting her experience this. His hand came up to cover mine, pressing it against his cheek. Thank you for sharing it with me, he replied, his voice equally quiet, for letting me be part of her life, of your lives. We stayed like that, connected, until Lily's squirming broke the moment, but something had shifted between us, a thawing that mirrored the snowflakes melting where they touched our warm skin. That evening, after Lily was asleep, I found Matteo in his study, as had become our habit. But instead of business documents spread before him, he had a small velvet box open on his desk. He closed it quickly when I entered, but not before I glimpsed what looked like a ring inside. Ellie, he said, standing. I was just coming to find you. What's that? I asked, nodding toward the box he'd tucked into his pocket. He hesitated, then sighed. Not how I planned this, he muttered, more to himself than to me. Then, meeting my eyes, he said, "It's a gift. For you. But it comes with a question I'm not sure you're ready to hear yet." My heart began to race. "Ask it anyway." He studied my face for a long moment, then slowly withdrew the box from his pocket and opened it. Inside nestled a ring, not the ostentatious diamond I might have expected, but a more elegant design, a deep blue sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds on a platinum band. "I remember you saying once that you found traditional diamond engagement rings unimaginative," he said quietly, "that you preferred colors, stories, meaning." I stared at the ring, then at him, speechless that he had remembered such a casual comment from our early dating days. "This isn't how I imagined doing this," Matteo continued, his usual confidence giving way to a vulnerability I rarely saw in him. "I had plans. Dinner in the city when it was safe. Perhaps the restaurant where we first met. But watching you today with Lily, seeing you smile at me without fear for the first time in so long," he took a deep breath. "I don't want to wait anymore." He moved around the desk to stand before me, still holding the open box. "I'm not asking you to forget who I am or what I've done. I'm asking you to see who I'm trying to become, for Lily, for you, for myself." His eyes held mine, earnest and intense. "I'm asking you to be my wife, Ellie. To build a future with me, one that neither of us could have imagined a year ago, but one that I believe could bring us both happiness." I stared at him, my mind racing. 6 months ago, I'd been running from this man, terrified of his power and what he represented. Now I was contemplating binding my life to his permanently, making official the ties that already bound us through Lily. "You've kept me here against my will," I said softly. "How can you ask me this when I haven't been free to choose?" Pain flashed across his face. "You're right," he said, closing the box slowly. "The timing is wrong. I shouldn't have—" "Wait," I interrupted. "That wasn't a no. It was a question." Hope flickered in his eyes. "What are you asking? If I said no, what would happen? Would you let me leave? Would you keep me here regardless? Would you separate me from Lily?" The questions tumbled out, the fears that had lingered beneath the surface of our careful coexistence these past months. Matteo was quiet for a long moment, his expression troubled. Then he set the ring box on the desk and took both my hands in his. "If you said no," he began slowly, "I would ask you to stay, for Lily's sake, for her safety. But I wouldn't force you to remain if you truly wished to go." His hands tightened slightly on mine. "I would ask for shared custody. I would provide for you both, ensure you had everything you needed. I would never, ever separate you from her." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, as was the pain the very thought caused him. "And what about your transition, your business changes?" I asked. "Would those continue?" "Yes," he said firmly. "Those aren't conditional on you staying, Ellie. They're about the kind of father I want to be for Lily, the kind of man I want to become. That doesn't change. Regardless of your answer." I searched his face, looking for deception and finding only painful honesty. "I believe you," I said softly, surprised to realize it was true. His eyes widened slightly. "You do?" "These past months, I've watched you with Lily. I've seen how you've changed, how you prioritize her above everything. I've listened when you've explained the business transitions, seen the risks you're taking to create a different future." I took a deep breath, and I've remembered why I fell for you in the first place. Hope blazed in his eyes, bright and fierce. "And why was that?" "Because beneath everything else, beneath the power and the danger and the wealth, there was a man who listened when I spoke, who remembered my favorite color and how I liked my coffee and the dreams I had for my future. A man who looked at me and really saw me, when I'd been invisible for so long." Slowly, I withdrew my hands from his and reached for the ring box on the desk. I opened it, looking at the sapphire gleaming in the soft light of his study. "I can't promise that I'm ready for this," I said honestly. "There's still so much between us, so much to resolve, but I can promise that I'm willing to try. To build something real, for Lily's sake. And maybe," I looked up, meeting his gaze, "for ours as well." The joy that transformed his face was unlike anything I'd ever seen from him. Raw, unfiltered, almost boyish in its purity. He took the ring from the box with trembling fingers and slid it onto my left hand, where it fit perfectly. Of course it did. Matteo left nothing to chance. "I will spend every day earning this," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Earning your trust, your faith, your love, if that's possible again. I swear it, Ellie." He drew me into his arms then, holding me as if I might disappear if he loosened his grip. I let myself lean into his embrace, into the familiar scent and warmth of him, into the comfort of no longer fighting the current that had been pulling us together since the moment we met. "It won't be easy," I murmured against his chest. "There's still so much we need to figure out." "Nothing worthwhile ever is," he replied, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "But we have time, and for the first time in my life, I have hope for a future I can be proud of. A future Lily can be proud of." 6 months later, as spring burst into full bloom across the estate, we were married in a small ceremony in the garden. Lily, now walking with the determined waddle of a 15-month-old, scattered rose petals with more enthusiasm than accuracy as Elena helped her down the petal-strewn aisle. Matteo waited for me beneath an arbor laden with climbing roses, his eyes never leaving mine as I walked toward him in a simple white dress that made me feel more beautiful than any couture gown could have. When he took my hands in his, I felt not the grip of a captor, but the touch of a partner, someone who had proven day after day his commitment to the promises he'd made. The business transition was well underway, with legitimate enterprises now accounting for over 60% of the Visconti holdings. We'd established a foundation using funds from the less reputable businesses, directing the money toward organizations that helped victims of trafficking and domestic violence, a redemption of sorts for the darker aspects of Matteo's past. I had returned to school, completing my business degree through online courses, and now helping manage the legitimate side of the Visconti enterprises. It gave me purpose, independence within our shared life, a way to use my mind and skills that fulfilled me in ways I hadn't expected. Security remained tight around the estate, around our family. Some threats from Matteo's past persisted. Some old associates resisted the changes he was implementing. But within our home, within the boundaries he had once used to confine me, I had found a freedom I hadn't known existed. The freedom to love without reservation, to build a family on my own terms, to create a future that honored both our pasts while transcending them. As we spoke, our vows beneath the flowering arbor, Lily toddled over and wrapped her arms around both our legs, looking up at us with Matteo's eyes and my smile. "Family," she declared proudly, one of her newest words. Matteo laughed, the sound unburdened in a way it hadn't been when I first met him. He lifted Lily into his arms, then wrapped his free arm around my waist, drawing me close. "Yes, Piccola," he said softly. "Family. All of us. Together." Later that evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold, we stood on the terrace watching Lily chase fireflies across the lawn under Elena's watchful eye. "Any regrets?" Matteo asked quietly, his arm warm around my shoulders. I considered the question, thinking of the winding path that had brought us here. The fear and anger, the running and capture, the slow rebuilding of trust and the eventual blooming of something stronger than what we'd had before. "No," I said honestly, leaning into his embrace. "This isn't the life I imagined for myself. It's more complicated, more challenging in some ways." I looked up at him, at the face I had come to love again, differently but more deeply than before. "But it's also richer, more meaningful than anything I could have built alone." He kissed me then, tender and reverent, a promise renewed with each passing day. When we parted, his eyes held mine with the intensity that still made my heart race after all this time. "I told you once that both of you belonged to me," he said softly. "I was wrong. We belong to each other. All of us. Together." As Lily's delighted laugh floated up from the garden, as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the evening sky, I knew he was right. What had begun as captivity had transformed into choice. What had been forced had become freely given. And the man who had once been my greatest fear had become my greatest love. Complicated, flawed, but fiercely devoted to creating a future we could all be proud of. A future where our daughter would grow up knowing only the strength of her father's love, not the darkness of his past. A future we would build together, day by day, choice by choice. In the end, he had claimed us both, as he'd vowed that rainy night so long ago. But in doing so, he had given himself to us as well, completely, irrevocably, and with a love that had transcended the boundaries of the world he came from, and the one I'd tried to build without him. As we stood together on the terrace of what had truly become our home, watching our daughter's joy in the simple magic of fireflies and twilight, I knew with absolute certainty that I wouldn't change a single step of the journey that had brought us here. Both of us had found where we belonged, together.